It's Blue Monday, the last one of 2024, and sadly, it's not going to be the most enjoyable one for you to listen, but hopefully, it's something that gives you a little bit of, I don't know, maybe a much more joyful Christmas than what you expected. Given the three fantastic draws that we had, we were all buoyed up, ready to go and play Nottingham Forest, who are now second in the Premier League at Goodison, to say a good farewell to Goodison for 2024, its last year at our home stadium. But sadly, Everton decided to come and destroy the remaining few days of the festive times. And it's me and Rodger this morning. And if you listen to post match, as we were just talking about then, nothing was held back on how Everton performed here and what Everton have done under Sean Dyche lately. And it was interesting, Roger. I want to start with this. I was said to by Keith, who you'll have heard on the post match, who said
Mhm.
to me beforehand, how how much better would we feel if we'd have lost those three games we were expected to lose and then go and get the 3 points against Nottingham Forest, which I think is a valid point. Um, but given the way in which we played at home to Forest, given that we were meant to go into this with a bit of momentum, that was an absolute disaster, and I can't think of a much worse way than Everton could have gone about getting back to Goodison after those results.
Yes, a very disappointing performance and a very disappointing result, Dave, to end the year, as you say, especially when, you know, Dyche has got his ducks in a row and we've discovered how to defend again and we've put in some very good performances. The one at City particularly good, scoring a goal, Lord above. Um, yeah, but Dyche keeps he keeps tripping himself up, doesn't he? Because he says it's about winning games, and that's the one thing he can't bloody do. He can't win games of football because he doesn't set his team up to win games of football. And to an extent, he doesn't have the players to win games of football. But when the defence reverts to early season form, which it did yesterday, horrific defending. I mean, without Pickford, we'd have lost 4 or 5-0 yesterday. And you know, of course, I would rather get 3 points from winning a game of football. If you give me a run of 4 games, I can have three draws and a loss, or a win and three defeats. I think I'd prefer a win and three defeats because I'd like to win. Football's about winning. It's a team game, and you want to win games of football, and we can't do that. You know, there's so many different ways. I put something out on Blue Sky last night to look at these last 9 games. You could say, you know, our record in them is that we've won one, drawn five, and lost three. That's only three defeats in 9 games. That's quite good. And if you were so much of a masochist to watch Match of the Day as I did, they put something up there that, you know, Everton are on a 4 or 5 game unbeaten run, which is their best in 5 years. Um, but it's desperate to watch. In those 9 games, we haven't scored in seven, mate. We've talked about this, haven't we? Um, really poor yesterday and a real downer because there was every opportunity to entertain the home crowd. Festive season, yeah, Forest are going, but really, they're just well organised. I mean, it's not long ago that Forest. Last season we were thinking, oh, Forest will probably go down. I mean, why have they gone with Espirito Santo?
Yeah.
He doesn't know what he's doing. They've bought too many players. They're going to get a points deduction. Forest are a relegation candidate. They're second. You know, yeah, it's very disappointing. And I thought that post match was brutal, and very accurate and very fair, actually. I think some of the things said about Tarkovsky, to a lesser extent, Mikolenko, but Tarkovsky, why does he keep running backwards away from the ball? Why is he scared to put in a challenge other than one that's going to get him booked? He's not a leader. He's always just running along behind the goal scorer as the goal goes in the back of the net. Very, very poor performance from him.
I want to go back to what you said there about the run of form that I think ourselves, obviously it's before our eyes, but I think it's really easy to tell if people have been watching us or not when we're
Yeah.
talking about when we're talking about it's one loss in nine or whatever the record is, because the way in which we haven't lost games haven't been things that we're looking at and proud of. Yeah, I understand Arsenal away, I understand City away, Chelsea at home. Harrison misses that chance, we probably go on and win it. Similar against City, I guess.
Yeah.
But the manner in which we've drawn these games, how many of them have we looked like we've got a decent opportunity of winning them? Is what I put at the top of the list of questioning these. If you're somebody who hasn't watched Everton, in
Mm.
the last few weeks, but also the manager seems so content with this. He seems to, and I think we've spoken about it quite often that we've been saved, I think, or something that's a big factor of why we haven't gone down. Well, certainly last season, why we weren't sort of battling towards the end of the season, is because you've got three sides that are worse. It's almost like a
Yeah,
cliche now. There are three worse sides than Everton. I mean, in the
yeah,
tradition of the Premier League, that doesn't always mean that you're going to stay in the division. You still have to do things to stay in the division. If you were to go, we won't do it now, but if you were to go by the three sides that have come up, I think again, traditionally in the last couple of seasons, people have been saying, well, they're by far the three worst in the league. They're going to be the ones that go back down. I think, make no mistake about it, you look at that Premier League now, we're 3 points outside the bottom three. We've won only three games in our entire season so far.
yeah.
Um, it doesn't indicate to me that going and getting draws and simply not losing games is adequate enough to keep you in this division by itself. And then of course moving on to what you said there about Tarkovsky, and I've retweeted it just now. There's a great and I know when you get a still, it's a misconception at times when you get a still of what you see on the TV, and if you pause it, it looks a lot worse. But this is so accurate because it's got Decore, Mikalenko, and Tarkovsky sort of in a triangle when that ball comes back, and you've got Decore
Yeah.
running towards it, who fucks up. But then you've got a cap, and more the point I wanted to talk to you about really is that's the captain of our side there in Tarkovsky.
Mm.
I've had issues with him for quite some time. Actually, I had sympathy towards Michael Keane, which probably indicates the level at which Tarkovsky's gone to. That's probably a little bit unfair on Keane because I think he's been fine. The reason why he's been really good is the fact that we had no point to criticise him, which is an indictment of his time with us. But nonetheless, he wasn't as bad as what we've seen here from again our captain in recent times. And um, what does my head in with him is that he has a reputation of this sort of defensive hard man who sets example and should be someone who he puffs his chest out and does all the usual stuff you expect from a captain. One that I think traditionally it's sort of a sentimental thing as an Everton captain, isn't it? For most clubs, really, you've got a captain who you want to lead by example. Um, that yesterday, I mean, he looked like he was all over the place. Roger, he looked like I just said there, the way in which I put it is he looked like he wanted to shy his way out of plenty of different things that happened in that game when the ball was crossed in. I am fed up. I am so fed up at this diagonal he insists on playing. And I think Keith mentioned it. He's playing diagonals to a lad who's 5 foot tall
Yeah,
in
exactly.
Ndai. And it
Yeah,
just it just makes no sense to me whatsoever. And whilst you've got a manager, and we know he's picked his favourites repeatedly, he did so again with Jack Harrison. He's done it with Decore. We could argue all day about what the alternatives are, the lack of them. But it's like he watches this game, Dice, and you've mentioned rightly so his comments after games. But you've got a captain who goes and I said perform in inverted commas there. Um, that's a deep issue that we've got there. In that he's not going to get
yeah, of
dropped
course it
if he's
is.
the captain.
No, he won't.
He's not going to
No,
get dropped by a manager though, Roger. And that's a massive
no,
issue when you've got
no.
him
What
being the worst player on the pitch.
I think you're right. I think he's slightly lucky to stay on the pitch again yesterday.
Yeah, yeah,
His first lunge when he loses control of it, bringing it out of defence and dives in, gets a yellow. Could have had a red, and then could have had a second yellow at least once or twice more. I think he's a very what he isn't is an intelligent footballer. Okay, so if you compare him to somebody like Jagielka could read danger, anticipate danger. He wasn't a great, beat your chest captain and fist clenching captain, but he was an intelligent footballer. And increasingly, James Tarkovsky reminds me of a cross between Ashley Williams, who was an appalling defender the time he was with us, and Mason Holgate, who was always arriving late on the scene just as a goal scored. I think he's a very, very his form this season. He had a very good game against Chelsea, right? You have to give him credit
yeah,
because
absolutely.
you know
Yeah,
he did. He put his body on the line. He made some great blocks against Man City as well. But yesterday, that performance was absolutely appalling. And we were back to Manchester United defending the goals against Manchester United, where Xerxes running in and Tarkovsky just runs backwards. I mean, backs off, and backs off again. And it's not good enough. I mean, it patently isn't good enough. And yesterday was dreadful. I mean, to me, if you watch football, if you're involved in football as a spectator, as we are, and we watch a lot of it, and I've watched a lot of it through my slightly larger number of years than yours. But if you're a professional manager, and you think that that level of performance from Tarkovsky is acceptable, and you're going to select him again next up down here at Bournemouth. Thank you, which I'll look forward to cheering him on next week. It's not good enough. It's you can see it with your own eyes. Your Auntie Ethel could see it with her own eyes, and that's not suggesting that she shouldn't be able to. It's he's not good enough. That performance is awful, and he needs to be taken out of the team. The manager won't do it because the manager is also unintelligent. And I keep coming back to this notion that Les has put forward. I think it's Les that this manager can get draws out of defeats. Good, tick in the box. But he also turns wins into draws, and that's losing 2 points. Every time you turn a win into a draw, you're losing 2 points. Every time you turn a defeat into a draw, you're gaining one.
Yeah.
And those numbers don't add up. It's just not good enough. It was rubbish, rubbish football. I mean, would it have been different if Van Dijk had slotted Jack Harrison in as I think he should have done in the first half? Would Harrison have scored? He's had a few chances to do so. Um, Patterson comes on, changes the game. All of a sudden, he's making crosses. We've got an overlapping fullback, wouldn't you know it? A little bit of a flick from Dom just wide of the post, and a bit of a bounce off Beto's head as well, and nearly, but all too little, too late, wasn't it? I mean, yeah, so much wrong with yesterday. As you say, we could talk about it. We could talk about it all day long. But the stats. This is the issue with Dyche. You can look at the stats in one of two ways. You know, you can either say three good battling draws, and so unlucky to lose to Forest. Maybe they were tired. I've got lots of friends who don't support Everton, and they're always surprised. And I send them links to our pods and other stuff, and they're always surprised that we don't like Dyche and we want him out because they think he's doing a good job because the stats sort of tell you that. Is he heck? The worst thing was, again, Match of the Day put up this stat 2024, right, when we've won 8 games competitively. And in 2024, we had 132 shots on target. The Red Shite had 14 in one game yesterday, by the way. Anyway, we've had 132 shots on target in 2024. And the next lowest is Wolves with 156. And in that year, we have scored 31 goals. And the next lowest is West Ham with 50. We've scored 31 goals in 2024. It's not good enough. And that's why we are where we are, because we can't score goals. It's evident we can't score goals. Some of that's down to recruitment, 100%. 100%. Thelwell's not recruited good enough players. But it's also down to the manager for the way he set the team up. And frankly, enough's enough. As far as I'm concerned, enough's enough. There's got to be a change made. If the footballing department thinks that people like Lindstrom, people like Harrison are good enough, if the footballing department can't see that, we have failed to fill a hole at left back for 3 years now, 2 years since Digne left, it's just totally unacceptable. And without Jordan Pickford, we would be in the bottom 2 or 3, without question. And you can't live on that forever.
The point you made there about others who said, "Oh, Sean Dyche has done a fine job and whatnot," and the thing that doesn't align with each other is you mentioned there Thelwell, which is it's another facet of why this is becoming a bit of a shit show now, which it has been for the last few years when we're tiptoeing around getting relegated. But I think the reference to many people, if they're having a question, a chat with yourself and me, you've got plenty of friends there to work with who don't watch Everton, thankfully,
Yeah.
too much. They would
Lucky
then,
for them.
yeah, exactly, yeah. They would say, well, isn't he getting the best out of a team, a poor squadded side? When I have really watched Everton, they don't look like they have much to go on. Lack of goals scored, like that's astonishing what you just said there, by the way. Average, I think average was just over 3 shots on target per game, which is disgusting as it is.
Absolutely.
But you compare that to what can Sean Dyche get out of this lot, and he seems his post. I haven't read it. Sorry, I never watched it. I have read his comments again, which is it's like water off a duck's back in terms of how much he defends himself. And it's players, it's this, it's that. It's like, I told you so sort of mentality that he has in all this. But I'd say the emphasis from others who don't watch us too deeply is, well, he's getting the best out of this squad that he's got. That squad, and I said this, I mean, I don't know if I was going a bit too far in saying this, but I said that at least, or there should be, at least 5 or 6 sides that Everton are better than, squad-wise, purely squad-wise,
Yeah.
and level of player that we've got. because the league
Yeah,
in general is that poor. You don't need anywhere near 40 points to stay in this division anymore. 35 probably keeps you. I think that's it. Probably the average in the last few years. 35 points probably keeps you in the Premier League.
we've stayed
Um,
up with 36, haven't we? Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
something along those lines. How does that not indicate to people who haven't watched Everton that there's a massive issue here, which is either the squad or the manager? Now, whilst we're adamant, and most fans are adamant to say, well, the squad is probably being not difficult to do so, granted, the best that we've had for the last maybe two or three, certainly the best that Sean Dyche has had, let's say. And yet there's still a massive question mark that we're still going to be in this division. That is a massive indictment to why you need to move this man on. And I was
Yeah.
discussing again, debating with somebody just before we started there, who's like, well, be careful what you wish for, and look at what
Mm,
happened
mm,
over at Leicester.
mm.
And look, I completely understand when people say Everton just changed managers for the sake of it, but that always doesn't mean it's wrong. You can't you can't just use or not use a narrative that suggests you need to change your manager anyway. Look, you can
Yeah.
play football manager like a lot of younger fans do, like many fans do when they're looking at the team, thinking, "Oh, that isn't good enough." I've seen it plenty. I've got friends in Newcastle who talk about Eddie Howe that way, because Eddie
Hmm.
Howe's not for, he's not a star sort of, someone with a big reputation. He ended up there before they got taken over, and he's done a reasonably good job at Newcastle. I don't think anybody could really deny him that. But
Absolutely.
ourselves, we've had what, I don't know, 10, was it 12 in 10 years, something like that, if you include the caretakers. And granted, when people say Everton have changed managers far too quickly, maybe Silva, there's a few you can go down the list of, the ones who've
Yeah.
left because
Yeah.
people got the job, like Ancelotti. But now we're in a position where people say, oh, it never works when we change manager. It never works when we change manager. Fine, take that point again, but that doesn't make it a fact. It does not factually mean that if you got rid of Sean Dyche and brought somebody else in, we get back into the same situation. That you're saying that because it's not worked in the past. That doesn't mean it doesn't work in the future. And that's the thing that I find myself banging on about all the time to people who say you can't do better than him. Everton, look at, like I said, look at Leicester. Look at what other sides have done when they've got managers in from the ones who left. Be careful what you wish for and all that shite. Um, you can't just keep a job. I probably worded it in a different way. You can't keep your job because the record of changing has gotten worse. And we're now at that position with Sean Dyche, Rodger, where it's untenable for me. Now, really easy for him to sell to the media that, oh, look at those three great draws we had against sides that are in the top six in the Premier League. Well done, Sean. That is right in the middle of your forte that you've got to go somewhere and not concede goals. That is what he's made his career on. That's what he did at Burnley. The stat that astonishing stat you read out there, pretty much I would predict that's the same at Burnley, something like that, where they've
Hmm.
stayed in the Premier League for the best part of the decade that he was there. Um, Look, we're not in a position where, and maybe it was jumping the gun a little bit, saying Everton should be a mid-table side, but Everton shouldn't be in the position they're in right now, and we certainly shouldn't be with the players we have watching the level of football that,
Yeah.
that we're seeing at Goodison. The one question I wanted to get to you on, and I did mention it in the in the post match, but we didn't really discuss it too much. Goodison's to me seems like a massive issue here, and I'm not saying that to us as fans. I'm saying that in regards to what sort of mentality is he instilled on these players if they're coming out on Goodison to put on that shit that we've seen against Forest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yet we look much more comfortable going away to the champions of the Premier League. And that to me is, if you continue doing that at home, our record's awful at Goodison. I prefer Everton to be away from home. I feel more comfortable. For me to go and say that, for a fan to go and say that, is pretty much of an example of how how difficult things are right now watching Everton at
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's so much I could come back with on that.
Yeah.
I think Mosey hit it nail on the head with his absolutely outstanding 7 minute rant on the start of the post match. At home, and certainly at home against a team like Nottingham Forest, we're expected to take the game to them. That's not an unreasonable expectation. We've got professional footballers. We'd like to play a game of football with the intention of trying to win it. And Dyche can't do that. And that's not the way his team is set up. I don't think it's the way his Burnley team was ever set up because they were underdogs against anyone, whether they were at home to Norwich City or Chelsea. They were underdogs. That's the mentality that he instilled in them. And I will not accept that. And I will never accept that at Everton. And that's why, for me, he's never, whilst he deserves a lot of credit, especially for last season, when he was the only one with the cojones to stand up and represent the club at press conferences. And he went through an awful lot, and I give him huge credit for that. The quality of the football we are seeing is dreadful. It's the lowest of the low. You know, the goal scoring stats, only Mike Walker has a worse goal scoring stat. And again, sorry to bore people with stats, but we have failed to score in 38% of the games under Sean Dyche. So that's 28 out of 74. The only person with a worse record was Mike Walker. He only managed 31 games. And we failed to score in 15 of them. It's dreadful. But there are three angles to this, Dave. And you're right, Goodison is an issue. Goodison's an issue because it's our home ground where the fans get behind you. The fans have carried this team for 3 years now. It's totally unacceptable. And I feel, I'm angry, which is bizarre because it's the festive season. I was in a good mood. I'm going away. I'm on holiday, which is long planned at the end of this. And I'm actually in a good mood, but I'm really angry. I'm really, really angry with this nonsense because the recruitment has been shit. In my opinion, Thelwell has done a poor job, and that squad isn't very good. I don't think it's a top half squad. I don't even think it's a mid-table squad, but it should be playing better football, and it should be winning more games of football. And if you win more games of football and those wins aren't turned to draws, and okay, you get battered by Chelsea and City and Arsenal, move on, but beat Brentford at home. They were down to 10 men. We beat West Ham away. They weren't interested. We got 2 points. That's 4 points dropped in those games. And give Forest a game, have a 2-2 draw, exciting 2-2 draw against Forest. Let me make one other point about Dyche, right? His body of work at Burnley was self-evident, the work of a one-trick pony. Okay, I would argue that Nuno Espirito Santo's body of work at Wolves was much better, much more creative, much more positive, much more attacking. Now, I know he didn't do very well at Spurs. Spurs are unmanageable, almost as unmanageable as Everton, to be honest with you. You can't win. You turn them into a defensive team. The fans don't like it. You leave the back door wide open like Ange. The fans don't like that. Spurs are a very, very difficult club for anyone to go in and make an impact. But Espirito Santo has gone to Wolves. We as fans would have turned our nose up. We don't want Nuno Espirito Santo.
Yeah.
And also we would have turned our nose up at the signing of the likes of Chris Wood. You know, I'm a massive fan of Eddie Howe, and I get stick from people for doing that. But Eddie Howe, as a manager, has consistently made his teams greater than the sum of the parts. That's what a manager is meant to do. That's what a coach is meant to do. But again, we didn't want Eddie Howe. Oh, no, we don't need him. We didn't want Vita Pereira either, did we? And he's going to keep Wolves up at a canter, I think. We wanted Super Frank Lampard. So we've made really bad appointments managerially, and Sean Dyche was okay as an interim. But there is no future. We've got new owners. As you say, we should be staying up. But we should be 6 points clear of the relegation zone, not 2 or 3. And I think it's going to boil down to Leicester. I think Ipswich and Southampton are gone. And I think it's going to boil down to Leicester and us, because I think Wolves will pull away. Crystal Palace will pull away. And Leicester have got a bit more going forward than we do. They've got a chap called Vardy, and they've got some pace. Now, they're a bit shit at the back, but so can we be. And you can't 0-0 your way to safety. And we've got to start winning games at Goodison. You're absolutely right. It's our home ground. What's the point of it otherwise? You know? I mean, just imagine the nerves if that last home game to mighty Southampton, who I don't think are going to turn anything around, who incidentally have got fewer points than that Burnley team, the Derby team that only got 11 back in the day.
Yeah.
But imagine if we need something against Southampton in that last home game at Goodison. God almighty. It should be a time of celebration. It should be a time of farewells, and it'll be hugely emotional. But we've got Ipswich to play at home still, haven't we? We've got Southampton to play at home, and we must have Leicester to play at home. You know, these are games that...
6 pointers.
Yeah, 6, 9, 12 pointers, call them what you will.
Yeah.
You know, but you need an awful lot of draws to make up a 6-pointer if you lose it, don't you?
Exactly, and that's where draws are. Like I said, we mentioned the sides you've gone to and got a draw in, which is admirable, but you have to back that up, and we simply we've not been able to do so there, and I repeatedly just got in my mind what you said there about these shots on goal that we've had and various issues
dreadful.
there.
It's dreadful. I mean, but when you look at these teams that we are competing with, whether it's Leicester, whether it's Wolves, whether it's pick any team you like in the Premier League. They've got pacier players than we do.
Yeah.
Southampton have, Ipswich have. They've got pace in them, and what part of Kevin Thelwell's Dogs of War mixed with School of Science and a twist forgot to include pace? I mean, I think that has to be the biggest. Dyche talks bullshit. I'm sorry. People may think I'm unduly negative, but his press conferences are an insult to people's intelligence. He's taking the fans for fools, and he gets away with it because he spins some narrative or other. But Thelwell's ridiculous idea that we've developed a playing philosophy, it's utter bullshit. I don't care if the under 21s, under 17s, under 18s are doing it when the first team are playing like a pub team. It's ridiculous. And what on earth does School of Science with the Dogs of War combined with a twist? What does that mean? Those are it's a word salad that you know it's lacking in substance. And I really hope the Friedkins are having a good look at this because the footballing infrastructure at the football club needs tearing up and rebuilding. I'm sorry. It's just there is no strategy, there is no winning culture, and there is no sign of improvement. We said last week, didn't we? If you get these draws as a new manager, stabilize things at the back, people would go, great, excellent. But you're now into 3 years, not far off in terms of time you've had with these players, 3 different seasons at least. And there's no sign of that pattern of play becoming anything like entertaining. We are Burnley, and that's dreadful because I hated Burnley when they were in the league anyway.
Yeah. Well, the irony with them, I always end up finding my way talking about like Sam Vokes and Ashley Barnes
Yeah,
and
yeah,
lads who are actually effective at the shit show that he did, the way in which he
yeah.
plays football. Look, I mean, if you want to come to a Premier League game and you're from abroad or say from the States, you've got Rob Vera there. If he was to say to a friend, "Oh, look, I support Everton, come and watch a game there," I mean, you'd have to be apologising for them before the match even kicked off, wouldn't you?
Of
You
course
just
you
know
would.
what you're getting there. And, again, don't want to sound like a broken record here, but the amount of times I found myself saying that if you're Everton's opposition coming up in the next game, how long is it going to take your manager to say this is how you nullify Everton and what they do? It must take 5 minutes, if that. That
Yeah,
probably insults the intelligence of a Premier League manager if you're going to go and say that because it's
so
not.
predictable.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. You could
we're
watch.
so predictable.
You could watch our 5 minute package on Match of the Day, and us as fans would know how you're going to set up your team when you play Everton. Yes, you'll have to get through what should be a defensive wall where it's difficult to score against Everton. Conceding from Everton, I mean, you'd feel much worse than losing a goal against anybody else if Everton scored against you right now. I firmly believe
Hmm.
that. And we're
Hmm.
saying this. We're saying this as fans, Roger, who support this side.
I know.
We pay our money out to go and watch them, and we're talking about them as if it's commonplace to say these things right now, and it's quite upsetting when you think about it
It's
that
very
way.
upsetting. It is.
And
I mean, if I was an opposition manager, I would just have my strikers and attacking players practicing one-on-ones against Pickford because
yeah,
that's basically what you're going to get.
yeah,
You're going to get 5 or 6 of them every game, one-on-ones against Pickford. He goes down early, dink it over him. How do you go around him? Have runners with him. That's the issue. That's the really only thing they need to prepare for because they'll out battle us, they'll outfight us, they can outrun us. Um, Premier League fitness. The players are Premier League fit. What? I mean,
yeah,
what does Premier League fit mean? Jogging around whilst Chris Wood lobs your keeper.
yeah,
What do they do in training? They just
yeah.
practice running backwards, do they? It's nonsense. I've had enough of him, and it's not going to change. Well, hopefully it will, but if the Friedkins are believing all this bullshit that they're getting fed from Thelwell and Dyche, then it looks like we're in for a really tough end to the season and a really tough first half of 2025 when we should be enjoying ourselves and preparing for the biggest move the club's made in 100 years to Bramley Moore.
I think there's
It's
there's a notion really, which I don't know. I think I've had multiple times in as a supporter of Everton, as it gets worse before it gets better. Get get it getting worse than how it is, or let's hope this is as bad as it gets. But you look at that evidence against Forest there, you could see it getting even worse given the performances there by a lot of that team that was on the pitch, notably the captain there, Mikalenko, and I don't think we have to spend too much time sort of talking about how poor those players were.
no,
Um, But with that idea that you've got new owners in here, I would like to think, and I've no idea who these guys are apart from what we've read and we know from the previous business they have in the world and Roma and various things like that. Um, if your if your investment is threatened by basically falling apart, and you know this better than me, um, you have to make those changes. You have to make them ruthless. You've got to be ruthless about doing that. And dare I say it, that is why I can see light at the end of the tunnel here because they will not stand. Surely they will not stand for what they've seen yesterday and what they've seen from Sean Dyche since they've been here. I can understand a certain amount of games where you're thinking, well, yeah, I can see various things that he set up well. Those results, I mean, those results he went and got at those in those three games there, those draws,
Mm.
they must have that must have gone a long way to them to think, yeah, we'll leave this till summer. This thing looks like it's pretty efficient in what we need to do. We'll reassess it. We need to sort of see new faces at any time that you've started a new job. You go around, you meet everybody, you get a general idea of what's going on there,
Yeah.
who likes who, and various issues. But they've gone and watched Everton then in those games. They wouldn't have to research Everton much to realise that this manager is not fit for purpose going forward here. And now you look at that
Well,
league table,
David,
and
depends.
yeah,
Sorry,
go on.
mate. It just
No, go
I'm
on.
sorry to jump in, but it depends how knowledgeable they are about football. Because those three games for Sean Dyche were ideal. Arsenal away, Chelsea away, Manchester City, Chelsea at home, Manchester City away. I mean, any 1 point from those three games, if he only got 1 point from those three games, he could claim he was a superstar.
Yeah,
And these people may well go, oh, that's fantastic. I mean, gee, Arsenal, we're the only team to stop Arsenal scoring at home this season, for the love of God. And yet we're the only team to lose to Southampton. And this is the problem. There's a yin for every yang with Dyche, right? Because, you can just imagine Nottingham Forest, very good. We were a bit unlucky, but they're a very good team. Look at them; they're second in the league. The players were a bit tired. I've only got a small squad, and you can imagine the excuses. And if they don't know football as we do, as fans who followed not just this club, but you watch football, you can see that that squad is going nowhere, and that squad isn't going to win many more games. Now, if you want to bet the farm on Ipswich, Southampton, and Leicester just falling apart and drifting off, and only 32 points to stay up, fine. But what if Leicester win two games on the
yeah,
bounce?
yeah,
Yeah, and let's not forget those teams will have to play each other. You know, and there are sides like Brentford washing around who are rubbish away from home. And before you know it, and you maybe get you maybe get, I don't know, a Champions League team at Villa, for example, at home after they've had a trip away in the Champions League, or they're more focused on that. So these other teams are capable of winning games. And it's perfectly clear that the quality of football, this manager and this director of football have no long-term future at Everton Football Club, to me. My personal opinion, and I
yeah.
can back it up with data and statistics to support that. So now is the time to change, because I think we are more likely to go down if Dyche stays in than if we make the change now.
We've only
And
got a
people
couple of
can
minutes.
people can argue with me for that, but that's the way I see it. There's more than enough. There's more than enough evidence to support it. However, he's always got I got three draws against big teams. Look at my defensive record. You haven't scored in 7 of the last 9 games, Sean. It's not good enough.
Mm,
Thanks for all your service. Thanks for everything you've been through. Here's a few quid. Now off your pop.
mm,
And he's not getting another job in the Premier League in the rest of his career.
no.
So, you know, get on the Sky Sports sofa.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he'd be right in there, wouldn't he? Take that, getting however much million we'd probably end up having to give him if we sack him before the end of the season. And we've only got a couple of minutes left here because we're on Zoom today. Excuse me. The point I want to emphasize with what you've just mentioned there is how many times in this conversation and the rest we've had so far this season, reliance upon other results from elsewhere.
Yeah, yeah,
We're saying this in the middle of a season, Roger. We're not talking about going into the last 5 or 6 thinking, oh, the shite have got to go and do us a favour and we'll have a laugh about it and think, oh, it'll be all right anyway because the sort of safety cushion is the fact that they're shite and we've already got what we need to stay up. We've had to rely on that so much in recent seasons, and I don't see this ending in any different way unless they make that
no.
change now. Um, just before we go now, what do you see happening? Do you think he'll go soon?
All right. Prediction, no, I don't think he will. I think they'll mess about, and he'll pick up an odd point here, an occasional victory, and he'll probably stay till the end of the season because I don't think they know football well enough, and they don't know English football well enough. These people, and I don't think they're particularly well advised. And if they've bought the Thel, I said all along I'd get rid of Thelwell at day one. I'd find a real director of football and bring one in, and then let him make the appointment. Let him put, hold Dyche's feet to the fire. I actually don't think they will. Makes me quite cross, because now is undoubtedly the time. If I were advising them to make that change, and I don't think they'll have the balls to do it because I don't think. I think they want stability, and stability is rubbish if it's rubbish stability.
Yeah.
If this is stability, this shit being served up game after game, particularly at home, if that's what happens when Sean Dyche's teams get 63% possession, dear, oh dear, oh dear. Yeah, I think it's time to go, but I don't think they'll do it, I'm afraid.
I agree with you there. I don't think it'll happen, and the fear is that they do it too late as well.
Yep.
That's it for this Blue Monday, which we wish was a lot more a lot more happier to listen to at the end of 2024. But as always, thanks for sticking with us. The thousands upon thousands of you that tune in to us, even more so when we lose games as well, which is the Everton podcast way. More people listen when we lose than they do when we win, which, well, sadly, is quite a lot of the time, really, Roger. But thanks as always. It's been great having you back on and having you as the regular show on a Monday. And yeah,
Thank you, Dave. I mean, can I just say something? I think the Blue Room is absolutely brilliant, and I'm so chuffed to be part of the team again. It's great. Really enjoyed the banter with you and Les and others, and keep it going. It's therapeutic, it's cathartic, but it's always great to talk Everton. So thank you, and happy New Year to every Blue out there.
no problem at all, mate. That's a really good way to end things for this year, 2024. We'll be back, next Monday, which is in 2025. Let's see what we're talking about this time next year, if Everton is still a Premier League side when we go and play at Bramley-Moore. Thanks to everyone, and yeah, we'll see you in 2025. Up the Toffees.